Hello and welcome to Conversations from the ANF podcast. In this episode, we speak to adoptive parent and author Sarah McGeough. She shares her experience as an adoptive parent and is open and honest in relation to her challenges in getting through the process and having her child move in. Sarah also shares how and why she decided to write 2 books, and we've included the details in the notes. As always, if you've experience of adoption, fostering or special guardianship from any perspective, personal or professional, and would like to share that on the podcast, please do get in touch through either our Facebook page, Twitter, or you can email us at the anfpodcast@gmail.com.
My name is Sarah McGeough and I am an author of 2 children's books and I am a book coach.
Excellent. Now, the 2 books, which we might as well, we'll just dig deep and go for, imagine this is some sort of
Why
promo.
not?
Why the hell not? Is the Flamingo Family book series, which is Eddie finds a family and Eddie feels at home. They're books about adoption. So why have you written 2 books about adoption?
So we adopted our son quite a few years ago, and I thought there was no books out there that would describe it to him, and I felt a bit uncomfortable as a mummy. So it was very much the case that I was thinking about what I could do, and we got into lockdown. It was lockdown in 2020, and I decided that I was having a conversation with one of my friends and I literally decided that he wanted to write a book, and I thought, that's quite a good idea. Why don't I do that? I've got a bit of spare time on my hands. And I went away and thought about it for a little while. And then in the end, I started to think, well, actually, there was 2 books that I had in my head, but it felt very right at the time that I should go down the adoption route and start thinking about looking at that in a bit more detail. So I started to write it out. And I asked my son to help. He was quite little at that time, but it was nice to get him involved. It kind of came to life. So Eddie Finds a Family was born, and it took about 6 months for me to get it out there into the world. But once I'd started, it was mine and my husband's and my son's story. And I wanted to get it out there, and I could see that I was getting a lot of really good feedback about putting it out there a lot more. And it was just really lovely. And I could see I was getting more excited about it. And it was just very much the case that I wanted to, first of all, I wanted to help my son. That was my initial aim. And then I could see how much I could help other families and other children to understand, and not just adoptive children. It was very much the case I can help all children understand adoption better. So Eddie Finds a Family was born in 2020, and I launched it at the end of that year. And then I got the writing bug.
Excellent. Well, we'll move on to that. I'm gonna sort of pause there because you've sort of piqued my interest, and I've got questions. So if you're comfortable to talk about it, can you tell me what brought you to adoption? Because it's not, there's lots of mythology and lots of cultural stuff around, adoption. But what brought you, and what was that experience like?
Well, me and my husband were trying to have a child, and it wasn't working as we hoped it was. So we went down the IVF route, and sadly that became quite difficult, and it was quite a traumatic experience. And I'm very open to sharing. We went through, I had an ectopic pregnancy, emergency surgery. It was all quite hard going. And in the end, it became a lot about me and, saving me and everything else. But we still wanted to have a child, and we did go through IVF a second time, and that didn't work. And then I think by that point, it was like 5 years on. And we were like, okay, our time is ticking a little bit here. We need to consider other options. We'd spoken to our consultant, and interestingly, he had an adoptive child. So he had, it was lovely to talk to him about it, really, because it really kind of opened our eyes a little bit more. So he had his own birth child and an adoptive child, and it was just lovely how he described that to us. And then we came away, we were kind of dealing with, the grief of that loss. We did feel that quite a lot at that time. But, I think I was a bit more keen to progress the adoption route. I think my husband was a bit, he was kind of not quite sure about it. It didn't sit that well with him at that point. So basically we went to an adoption open evening. I think I went and looked for them and kind of got him to come along with me. And then all of a sudden it was like it dropped for him. It was very much all of a sudden it was something that was quite clear with him that it was something that he could do. There was a same-sex couple that was there that had brought their child with them, and it was just lovely to watch them interact. And then we asked questions, and then it went from there really. And so we contacted our local authority, and we had to wait a little while because you have to do the whole IVF break. You have to wait to make sure you're processing all of that loss, I guess, and that grief, and then they let you go on to the next stage.
Can I ask you about that? Because a lot of people, I suppose the majority of people still come to adoption having sort of navigated a journey of infertility. And it sounds like a really, you've articulated really well, but I just thought that some of that stuff sounds really tricky.
Yes, yes.
And even the, go away and process all of that. That how do you do that? What do you do? You go away and sit in a room, or do you, go and read a book?
Yes.
What does that look like?
It's interesting because at the time, certainly when we went through the ectopic pregnancy and we'd lost a baby, it was very early on. But I think at that point, we kind of were more concerned about me at that point. And I think even when we talk about it now, it was very much the case that we didn't really process the fact that we'd lost a baby. I think we were more interested in the fact that I was still here and alive. Yeah. And I think my husband was very much, we were very, very upset about it. But I think, it's difficult, isn't it, really? Because, it's true. How do you process that? How do you put that to bed? How do you put it in the drawer, never to come out again? To turn the key and that's it. And I think you just have to kind of come to terms with that. That's kind of, and I think what we did was that's what's meant to be. And I think certainly now we have adopted our son, we see that was exactly how life was supposed to plan out. We wouldn't have met our son if we hadn't have gone through that. I do see that very clearly. And I think that and I think, oh my goodness, we would have never have met him. And I can't quite believe that. So in my head, I think I've kind of dealt with it because of what I have now.
Yeah, and I'm not digging for your innermost secrets, but if you want to share them, that's fine. Makes for a great podcast. So you go away and you deal with grief. You go through the 10 steps of dealing with grief. That you're given. The worksheet. Go away and do that. And so then you return to the process. And what can you? Do you have any sort of reflections on that process and, what the good, the bad, the indifferent, what was it like having social workers or, all of that kind of, paint a picture.
It was a bit of a whirlwind to begin with when we had to do the 4 weeks we had to go on a course for 4 weeks. So it's every Wednesday we went along for a day and we sat in a room and we were talking about adoption, and it was getting us kind of used to the idea of going through the adoption process. And obviously they were throwing things at you that were kind of a bit and trying to get you to see things in the true reality of what children have to go through. And we sat there, we talked a lot, we were with other potential adoptive parents as well, so we kind of made friends with them, which was lovely, because we were all going through the same thing, so it was quite nice to do that. But at the end you were like, okay. And then I think, certainly now I think we were quite naive to the process and what it would do and what it had, how we involved in all of that. I think we were quite naive to it. Quite quickly after that, we did get said that we could go through to the next stage, and we had to, have the social worker come to visit, and you do all the things, make sure your house is pristine and tidy, clean it within an inch, go through all of that, and we didn't do the whole baking bread and cakes scenario to make it smell nice.
Yeah, that.
Yes, and the whole kind of feeling of sitting down and, okay, this is really strange. And then having to go through that very, very personal situation of, me sitting there by myself with the social worker, talking about my intimate secrets, things that I don't really share with other people, and literally feeling that you're having to answer every single question about my life, boyfriends that I had when I was 17 and all kind of stuff like this. So it was like, okay.
Did that feel relevant?
I don't know why that's relevant, but...
Yeah, did it feel like just, well, I'm here now? How did it feel going back through some of that stuff?
Yeah, I think it was, certainly some of it, I could see the importance of it. So I could definitely, if I'd been in long-term relationships or, if I'd lived with somebody, I could kind of see that was, the build, it is my relationships and how I am in my relationships. But I think when they were starting to maybe dig a bit deeper into people that I dated for a year and I didn't know where they were, because about the references to we need to find them, and I'm like, no, please don't. I don't want you to, but yes, it was just a little bit
but you can't say
strange.
No. It is odd, and is that in a normal context you would push back against some of that stuff, but did you feel able to, because there's they hold the keys, don't they?
Yeah, I think I did to a degree. And I think certainly I've spoke to people now and it feels maybe a little bit more stricter than it was when we went through the process, certainly. But yeah, I did think that we could push back a little bit and kind of say, why is that relevant, or ask the question. We were very open. So it was very much the case that I was very, very open. Like I'd sit there on my own talking to the social worker and, I would literally tell her things that maybe she didn't even want to know. And I was just telling her them anyway. And then the same with my husband. He was obviously spoken to separately. And then you feel a bit like, okay, we've got to make sure that we're telling the same thing. It was a bit like an interrogation occasionally, but I think I can see the necessity to do that. I can see how important it is. Ultimately, it is a little child's life, and they have the responsibility to make sure that child is being placed in the best home possible. Yeah. So I can see it, but I think when you're in the moment, you're kind of a bit like, and we had to go through hoops quite a lot, and we had to do things that we'd done once before, we'd had to do it again, and all of that kind of thing. Even when we adopted our son, it was very much we had to do the DBS check because it had run out. Right. So all those things, because it had taken so long, because it actually took us 3 years. So although the bit at the beginning was very quick, and I actually had to go through surgery in between all of that. So we had to have a bit of a pause for a few months while I recovered. But ultimately, it was quite quick. And I think we actually went through the process when it changed. So it was supposed to be like the 6-month thing that was very quick, rather than I think it used to be a year. And then we thought, okay, now we're going to have a child. It's going to be really easy. And no, it wasn't.
Well, that's really interesting, because I think that I've seen more and more, just, looking on social media, saying that time for people is just really difficult, because you've put a lot of effort and energy and enthusiasm into this decision. You've gone through this process, and then you sort of almost fall off the edge of a cliff. Like, now just sit in the pool of adopters and we'll cast the net for you. So were you involved with Linkmaker? How did that matching process, how was that for you?
Yeah, we were very excited I can remember feeling, oh my goodness, we've got the tick to say that we're allowed. So we were very, very excited and, jumped on Link Maker straight away. And then we were like, okay, what do we do? How do you kind of select or deselect children? And I think we actually went to like an open. It's not like a recruit. It felt like a recruitment fair, but it was very much one of those ones where you go along and there was loads and loads of like stalls, like literally with children on each one. So they were obviously coming from
actual
all the local
children or names of children.
So pictures of children. Yeah, not
that's quite a different
children.
event. Isn't it? That's a very different sort of event.
So it was all the local authorities that were coming along, and they all had their own separate tables, their stands, and they had the pictures of the children that they had currently, and some of them had videos of them and etc. And you walk in there very excited, and then soon become very overwhelmed and quite anxious and not really knowing what to do. And we didn't have anyone to kind of tell us, they weren't holding our hands saying, this is what you should do. Yeah. We went in as two adults going, okay, what should we do? And in the end, we came away, I think, with about 25 profiles, thinking, I don't know. And then you think, well, I don't want to put one of them in the bin because it's a child.
Yeah.
And you go through all of that kind of emotion of, well, how am I supposed to be selecting this child? Because I know when you look at a child, and it's just human nature, you go with what they tend to look like. That's your natural attraction.
Yeah.
It's very natural. And then you read more about them and you have to decide whether you can, it's the right match. You can cope with their potential additional needs, the support that they need, any trauma that they've been through. And you read their stories and it's heartbreaking. And you have to kind of take all of that away and then sit and digest that. And we did find it very, very difficult. And what happened was we were being quite selective because we were told to be selective. And then what started to happen was that we were being told no. So every time we'd go for, we'd pick a child, we'd get excited about the child. It was like, yes, it feels right. And again, it sounds horrible to have to pick a child. Yeah, it's just not nice at all. And we went through that, and then we were, getting excited, and we thought we'd get closer, and then we'd be, oh, sorry, you're not the right match. But then it started to get quite difficult, and we started to feel a bit uncomfortable. I think at one point we were told that we weren't matched because of the colour of my hair. And I started to go, okay. I didn't know that was part of the criteria. Anyway.
We can change that if we need to.
Yeah, and this isn't my natural colour hair. So, it's like, well, okay. And then, so we started to be... So rather than saying no, we started to say yes to all children. So any ones that we were being sent via email, they were asking us to look at them, we would just say yes to all the children. So we kind of changed our tack. And then that didn't really make a lot of difference either. And I think we actually we wanted a sibling group to begin with.
What were you approved for?
Yeah, we were approved for two children. Yeah. And so we were like, okay. And that's, again, something that, because obviously siblings can be hard to get matched or adopted. So we thought that was kind of a good thing. And then it went to the point where we actually was starting to kind of go, well, is this ever going to happen? I don't really understand what's going on here. And we did complain to social services. We did speak to the managers there, and it kind of wasn't really happening. We went to a few more of these little recruitment things, and but they were a lot smaller. And then I think there was a lot of change in the courts at the time, where a lot more children were being asked to go to their grandparents and and all of that. So it was kind of stopping the adoption orders coming through, and it was becoming harder. But in the end, it had been like 2 years or something. And we were like, well, OK, I don't really know if this is ever going to happen. So we actually did complain, and we put a complaint into our MP.
That takes some courage.
And it felt a bit like, OK, I don't want to go against what's happening here. But at the end of the day, I feel like that me and my husband can give my child a loving home. And I don't really understand what the issue is. And it felt like we were kind of not really moving forward with social services the way we wanted to. So we did complain to our MP. And
Can I ask about, because you're a very good orator, and you're telling a story very well. So I'm going to have to interrupt you to kind of ask questions as you're piquing interest. But so
yes,
is in those 2 years, is there this sort of creeping suspicion that there's something wrong with you, or they're not telling you something?
I think it was that they weren't telling me something. I think very much. I mean, interestingly, I have epilepsy. So I knew that would be a little bit of an alarm bell for anybody. So, and I think we asked the question a few times, and it was like, no, that's not the issue. I mean, ultimately, I could have my own child, and I still have epilepsy, so I can't, I can't get rid of it. So anyway. Yeah, we went to the MP. He then wrote to social services. They then had to deal with his letter and reply to him. I don't think they were very happy about that, particularly.
No.
And then they came round our house and were a little bit defensive. And then we got a new social worker. And
you're saying all of that with a smile. It's like this happy little story. I was thinking, I bet there was some white knuckles through all of this.
Yes, there was a few. You could see the kind of like tenseness going on, and trying to backtrack a little bit. And in the end, so we got given a new social worker, and that was the change that we needed. Right. All of a sudden, she was very alert. She was very engaged. She was interested in what we needed to do. She changed our profile. She told us that the reason why we weren't being chosen was because of my epilepsy. And
all right, so it's not a thing. It is a thing.
Yeah, and she said, and we have to say the right things. We have to reassure. Yeah. And we have to, obviously, I understand that you have to put the child's needs first, but there's things that can be put in place, et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't, again, that I was having, my epileptic fits are like once a year. So it's not like it's something that impacts my life every day. But they knew all of that. But anyway, so we got this super duper social worker, and, I'm still in contact with her now. She's amazing. And, basically, within, I would say, maybe 3 months, she phoned us and she told us there was a little boy that was going to be born. And then the next day there was another one. So we had like two to try and deal with at that point. Yeah, and we were like, okay. I remember being quite taken aback by it. And in the end, we went with the first because she rang and spoke to us about the first child. So we went with the first one that she told us about. So we felt that was natural. And then, it just was like a whirlwind from there, because I think at that point we had said, if it doesn't happen this year, we're going to stop. Me and my husband had been very clear that it felt like we'd had our life on hold for the best part of 8 years, near enough by now, because we'd obviously been trying for a child for 5 years. We'd been through the adoption process for 3 years, and we can't keep our life on hold forever. something needs to happen, or we just need to let it go. And he happened. And it was wonderful. And, you know, we got the call when he was born. And again, you know, it's one of those things, because they tell you, you know, never expect a very young child. It's very hard to get, you know, a brand new baby. I remember when we went through the process, they told us that, you know, the age that you want of your child should be higher. So we had to raise the age of the child to about 5 or 7, because obviously babies are difficult. And so we were told when he was born. And then
so was that a foster to adopt arrangement, or was it
no, it wasn't.
Right.
No, they did consider it, but they thought that it would be a little bit difficult, because then you have the contact with the birth parents. So they felt that it wasn't appropriate this time round. So they decided against it. So he went into foster care like day 2 of being born, and then we met him the following year, after the adoption order came through. And then it was just weird, because you know, you're telling people about this. I mean, obviously everyone that we knew that we were going through the process, but it's kind of like a waiting game. Even when you're at work, you're kind of, you know, I literally had to give them a week's notice to leave, to go on maternity leave. Whereas normally you have like a big bump, and it's like a gradual process. So we were told, we met his foster carer beforehand in a cafe, and then we gave her a little toy and a little blanket to give to him. So we chose little Paddington Bear, which is very something that we still have in our life now. It's very lovely, and a little blanket which he still snuggles with, and then we sat down and we mapped out the whole introductions, and that was going to be over 8 days. And we met him for the first time, and I still remember it now. Kind of, you know, it was just so surreal. Yeah, it's very surreal.
People often talk. I think that is that is kind of the moment, isn't it? If you think right back, that's the moment that we're all aiming for, isn't it? That kind of like that connection, that final connection. And so you describe it as surreal, but a lot of people have a lot of different responses to that. You know, it didn't necessarily meet up to the expectations. And how is it for you? How is it for your husband?
I mean, we had photos of him, which was lovely. So beforehand, we had some photographs, and I was very keen to, we'd had connections with the foster carer, and she was great at sending us videos of him beforehand. And I'd go, "Can you send me another one? Can you send me another one?" And I kept sort of hounding her to send me more pictures and images of him and things. On the actual day, so it took a little while for us to drive to where he was. I was desperate to go to the loo. So actually, my husband was the first person to meet him, because I didn't want to go into the room kind of like jumping around. So he was the first person to meet him, and I walked into the room, and he was holding him in his hands, and I was just, and we've got a lovely photo of that moment of us kind of holding, and him kind of looking at us, kind of going, "Who are you?"
Not unreasonably.
And he was very little, 6 months old, and it was just a remarkable thing. And again, I think we were only supposed to be there for the first like an hour, I think, because they're obviously conscious of not to overwhelm him. It's quite a big deal. And I think his foster carer had said, he's a bit wary with new people. He will always come back to me and always look for her. And we didn't have any of that. So he was quite happy to be with us in our arms. It just felt very natural. And in the end, we stayed for 2.5 hours, and we were feeding him and we've got videos of us, and we were just like, it was just like such a strange, and we kept going boo, 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 and we were just kind of going into that zone of being parents that have no clue what we're doing.
Yeah. Fair enough. That's, and it sounds like it's better. It was better than you could have possibly hoped for.
Yeah, no, it was lovely. It was really very special. That first meeting was, very special. Excellent.
So you travel through your transitions towards moving home, and any sort of thoughts on that? Was that a positive experience? Was it, again, you're still waiting, aren't you? You're neither here nor there. It's this grey world, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was very tiring, because obviously we only had 8 days notice. So we had 8 days notice to change our house and also to meet a baby. So we were going to meet him, driving to see him, spending more time with him. The second day we took him out, and we again didn't have a clue what we were doing. We were like, well, what do we do? How do we change his nappy? How do we know when he's hungry? We couldn't figure out the car seat. All of those things we do remember very well. And
all the things you'd spent years convincing people you knew how to do, suddenly, yeah. I've totally empathised with that, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just kind of like, okay, and how do we hold him? And you just very paranoid, I think. And, he cried on the way back, and how do we stop him from crying? And we go through all that emotion, and I think that it was just like a whirlwind, like a complete whirlwind of 8 days of us going to see him, then trying to get our house sorted, painted, buy the cops, go to mother care, get a pram, all of those things of, what clothes does he need? What nappies does he wear? All of those things all of a sudden become a massive priority. And we were exhausted by the end of it. We were going to go out for a celebratory dinner at the end, and we ended up going to Nando's because we were too tired.
Welcome to parenting.
Exactly. So we went to Nando's, and then the next day we went to collect him, and it was very emotional. The foster carer was very emotional. It was her first ever foster placement, so that was quite hard for her. Lots of tears, and lots of us saying that we would keep in touch and look after him, and we still send. Yeah, and we still send her photos. She doesn't see him any longer, but we still send her photos of him every now and again. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was just very emotional. And then we kind of come back home, and it's like, okay, we have a baby in our house.
It just settles.
Yeah, and then you're told, not to have contact with any family or friends for 2 weeks. And again, that's kind of not natural. It doesn't feel natural at all, because, when you bring a baby home, it's normally a celebration, and you always have your friends and family round. Everyone's fussing about you, and, it's seen as this great thing. But it was very much, you're not allowed to see anybody. And I think then we started to struggle. I think at that point we felt very isolated at that stage, and we found it quite hard. I think it was very much that I wouldn't say the bubble burst, but I think that we definitely started to struggle just because we felt that it was a lot of transition. He was great in the daytime. He was amazing in the daytime. At nighttime, it was just a completely different story. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't settling. We were trying every which way to get him to sleep, and it was very hard. And obviously, as a sleep deprived parents, it's not good.
No, it's interesting, because I think that is a really vulnerable time for a lot of families, because, like you say, we've got one message is stay away from all of your normal supports, don't be normal, and then this magnifying lens upon you, because again, you've got social workers. I think I said, you spent years convincing people it's going to be fine, and all of a sudden it may not feel as fine as you'd hope.
Yes, yes. And obviously you have the social workers coming around your house all the time. And again, you feel like you're on display a little bit of, I have no idea what I'm doing as a new parent. I'm a new parent as any other new parent that brings a baby home from hospital. Yeah. I'm still a new parent, no matter how old they are. And it was very much the case of I can't reach out to anyone that I would normally reach out to come around and help. And then they were coming round to check, and you feel a little bit like, okay, am I doing this right? You feel like you're being kind of judged a little bit, I guess, but that's more that's what I'm thinking rather than actually what they're thinking. But you get a bit paranoid about that. And, but yes, I mean, it was, and again, my husband then goes back to work. And then I'm left by myself and having to cope with being a mummy on my own. And again, my friends, most of my friends either have grown-up children or they don't have any children. So I don't hang out with mummies that have little children. So then again, that becomes quite a strange thing for me. And I had to start to learn to try and find new friends, to go to baby groups. And that takes a little while to get used to. I definitely think it took us a little while. And I think it was still a good 6 months or so until we really started to settle down. And the social workers were still coming to see us quite often. And it was just us getting used to being a family, us getting used to him getting used to us. It takes a little while to transition, I think.
So, I'm conscious, I've used up loads of your time, so I'm conscious to skip forwards to how you are now.
Are amazing. So we are a very, very happy family, and we love life. We love sharing each other's company, and having our son is just a blessing. Just the most amazing. He's just the most amazing little boy, and he's so full of life. He just enhances our life. I see so much. We see things through his eyes, and it makes our life so much better. And it's weird, we've taken him to, we were lucky enough, we've taken him to Disney, and he gets very excited about going to places. But we used to do that as a couple. But now we do it with him, and we see it through his eyes, and we experience things through him learning and teaching us as well. And, I just think we've clicked into place. It's lovely to be a family of three. He very much, we are his mummy and daddy, and we tell each other we love each other very, very often. And you can see, of course, there are things that are questionable to him, so he will ask us questions. We certainly started to notice a bit more, I think, round birthdays, and I think we had a conversation with him. I think it was on his 5th or 6th birthday, and he just came. We went out for dinner, and he said to me, and my husband had gone to the loo. He said to me, "Mummy, whose tummy was I in?" And it was just one of those questions that really catches you off guard. And I talked to him. I told him, and it was like, oh, okay. And then he starts talking about something else. He starts talking about, Mario or Thomas the Tank Engine. And that's one question. And then that's fine. You've answered it, and that's fine. Yeah. And you do get those questions from him. So, he sees, he has siblings, so he does see them, some of them. And again, that can bring up lots of different questions. He gets very excited to see them, but he can see that he gets a little bit anxious about seeing them as well. And then it's the saying goodbye. But then he'll then say to us, "Oh, it's a bit complicated having brothers and sisters, isn't it? I just like it, just the three of us." So he'll say things like that. It's much more fuss. It'd be too noisy, wouldn't it, if we had...
I recall my children when they were little, my three eldest children. My son, he was only 20 months when he came to us, and his sisters were a bit older. And one day he turned around and he went, I have no idea why you adopted those two.
Yes.
Life would be much better without them. You go, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how they rationalize it in their head. It's interesting. And you see, we've had conversations with school. I mean, we've been told that children that have been adopted can struggle with school a little bit more. So we're quite conscious of that. He needs a little bit extra support. There's children in his class that are adopted as well, so it's actually quite nice. I know that they seek each other out and they talk about things quite openly together. So yeah, but it's it just feels just normal. I mean, I volunteer for Adoption UK, so we do go out. So I'll say to him, we're going out to see children from Adoption UK, and he'll kind of know that that's the scenario that we're going into. And yeah, we talk about it very openly, because obviously that is something that you should do. And we're told that from a very early age, that it's not a surprise, it's not a secret, it's not something you get told when you're 18, or it's something that needs to be talked about.
So that leads me into your book. So tell me what inspired you, because normal people don't sit down and write books. It's an endeavor of love and heartache, isn't it, to write a book? So why did you write a book? And what tell me what the books are about. What was your aspiration for them?
Well, I guess, as I said at the beginning, I just had this idea. Me and my friend were speaking about writing a book, and then I went on to Facebook to go, let's see how I can write a book. And then I found Michael Heppel, and he helped me to write my book. So he's kind of like a motivational speaker, coach. And he did a course called Write That Book, and I joined it in 2020.
See how that works.
Yeah, I joined it. It's like Facebook knows what you're looking for, and then it tells you what you need. Not always, but and yeah, I decided to go on the course. I had a bit of free time, and I think I was just in that place that we'd moved house, and I was very happy with where I was, but I felt that I still had more to give with regards to helping my son understand adoption. I think that was my driving force very much. He was the person I was writing it for. He was my why. And as I say, it was our story, so it was very personal to us. So it was quite easy for me to write it down. It was, it took 2 weeks for me to write the main part of the story.
Right.
So Eddie Finds a Family is about Flossie and Frank, the flamingos, who can't have a chick of their own. And Eddie Emu is in foster care looking for a loving home. And basically the story is about how they find each other and become a family. But it's quite unique because it tells the story of both elements. So rather than it being just about the child, it's telling the story from the parent's perspective as well. And I wanted to make sure that was portrayed, because it is tough for the people that adopt. It is tough from that perspective. And also what the child has to go through. It's quite important that people understand what these children have to go through in their tiny lives. They don't choose to be adopted. They don't choose to be taken away from their birth families. It's not their choosing, but sadly sometimes it has to happen. And I think, with the story, I wanted it to be, because it's so sensitive, it's such a sensitive subject, but I wanted it to be, fun and powerful and engaging for children. So that's why I created the very colourful characters, and you have the Herbie Hippo and the Stella Stork, very cliche of the social worker. But, I just wanted to make it a little bit more fun so that children would really connect with it, because the adoption books that I'd seen when we adopted our son, I remember social services giving us a book, and it was just sort of a grey-faced child. And I didn't I was like, well, how on earth is any child going to connect with that? It just wasn't. It was like a grey book, and it just didn't have any kind of feeling to it at all. And it wasn't something that I was excited to read to my son at all. And it was like the book that they gave out with every successful adoption, and I was like, well, that shouldn't really be the book that goes out with every child. So I kind of wanted, it was kind of my mission to educate the world a little bit more. And I never want it to be, it's not just for adoptive families. I would like it to be for all children, because I think it's a lovely story. And all children should know about adoption. So it's something that's talked about in the classrooms. Yeah. It's something, families are made up in very different ways. And I think it's something we should embrace. And it shouldn't be a topic that's whispered and not spoken about.
Yeah. And has it had a good response? What are people saying about it? Have people embracing it and buying it?
Yes, it has. I was amazed. I mean, the first book I'd ever written, it's quite scary as an author.
I can imagine.
You don't know how it's going to be received, and you build up your connections, your network, and you send it out to lots of people. And I had like pre-orders for it. I got quite a lot of people interested, and then you start to get the reviews back. So there's actually loads on Amazon now. I think there's about 145 reviews on Amazon for my first
lot of reviews.
book. And most of them are 5 stars, so I can't really complain. And I was lucky because my social worker got me in touch with the CEO of Adoption UK, and she read it. She wrote a review on the back of the book, and then that did really help. And on the second book, Eddie Feels at Home, I guess it's a slightly more niche book, because it is very much about the child that's been adopted coming home. So Eddie comes to home to live with Flossie and Frank, and the ups and downs of that. It's not going to be just plain sailing. He's not going to move in and everything's going to be hunky-dory and fine. There are things that, he's going to find difficult, and also the parents are going to find difficult. So that is more about him settling into his new home. And Adoption UK endorsed that book. So I do give money to Adoption UK for every book that's sold. So
excellent. Good sales technique there as well. I see what you did.
Absolutely.
No, I mean, I think from my point of view is that I know that some people, not all people, but some people struggle to kind of, how do I start the conversation? Give me a hook. I'm happy talking about it, but not sitting my child down and saying, right, today we're going to talk about it. But this feels like a way that's really accessible. And as you say, the Eddie Feels at Home, it gives you the opportunity to maybe explore things that are a bit more complicated, a bit more difficult. So really like them as books.
Thank you.
I was thinking back when we adopted back 20 years ago plus, excuse me. It didn't seem like there was anything like that. It was very staid, and it just seems like that. Yeah, every adopter should be sort of given us something like this. One of your books. Well, let's lean into it. One of you should be given this book.
Yes, I'd love that to happen. It would be amazing. Yeah. And I try very much to connect with, different adoption agencies, and I'm trying to get it out there much more. I'm on social media quite often, doing these, having these opportunities. Thank you very much. Always does help to get the word out there. But yes, it would be lovely. I want to go to schools. I want to encourage, all children to understand adoption in a better way. And it is a very simple, I made sure that it was quite simple. It was quite hard with the words. You have to make sure that children understand what you're writing. Yeah. And I think some of the pages are a bit wordy occasionally, but I think that again was important, because I don't think you can describe adoption in necessarily very short sentences. I think it has and how Eddie was feeling at the time. Again, he was asking lots of questions, and a lot of that, some of that stuff in the book is reflective of what my son would say. I remember him having a conversation with me, and I talk to him about our social worker, and I said, "Oh, that's who found you for us," and his reaction back to that was I lost Mummy. And again, it's just the simple thing of the way that I say it to him was I lost Mummy. And it was just, and I did put it in the book because I felt it was so important, because that is how a little child is feeling. So you have to be very careful how you phrase things and how you talk to your children about these things. But yes, I wanted to just make sure it was quite easy for them to understand. And my son is a great editor, so it was very helpful having him, because he would say to me, "It doesn't make sense." Ruthless. He needs to work on his on his personal skills, interpersonal skills. Let you down gently. I've used up loads of your time. I really appreciate it. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you were hoping I was going to ask, or because you've been really open and honest about your experience, which is really, really helpful, and I think people will really appreciate some of that candor. I think the only thing I would say, and I think we did touch on it briefly when we were chatting before, is just about how much my eyes have been opened in the last few years. So obviously I've become a little bit more prolific in the adoption world, and I'm in lots of different groups now, and I as I say, I volunteer for Adoption UK, etc. But very much that I spoke to, I've made quite a lot of friends from other adoptees. So adoptees, and it has really opened my eyes to, I think I probably was a bit naive when I first started out, understanding my perspective from a parent. But actually, when I speak to adoptees and also slightly older adoptees about how they feel, how it has made them feel, it makes me really understand what challenges my son may have when he gets older. Because yes, he's very happy at this point. He displays being very happy. And a lot of people will say to me, and they do. And sometimes I'm not quite sure how to respond. But there's nothing wrong with him, though, is there? You get those kind of things, and they're trying to say it in the nicest possible way. But it kind of really gets my back up when people say that. And even when, he was allowed to go to school over lockdown, and some people would say to me, but why is he allowed to go to school? I was like, because he's a looked after child. But there's nothing wrong with him. Why does he need that? But yes, it's all those kinds of things. And it's about educating other people to maybe think about before they speak. And also, I think it's also educated me a lot about understanding that yes, he may display that he's perfectly fine, but when he gets older and he starts to understand exactly what's happening and what has happened, when he becomes a teenager, it may become more complex at that point, and it makes me ready for that. It makes me feel more prepared and more ready, because I have a better understanding from talking to adoptees. I think it's very important.
I mean, I think that's a really good place to kind of put a full stop, isn't it? Because I think that is what a lot of us adopters, that's a journey we're on, isn't it? And we're working towards. Yeah,
learning all the time. Yeah.
So where can we get your book?
So it is available via the Flamingo Family website, www.theflamingofamily.co.uk, and it is also on Amazon, so you can buy it in both places. Excellent. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook.
You're down with the kids.
Yeah, I'm trying to be. I haven't yet ventured into TikTok yet.
Right. Well, I can't recommend that at all. Sarah, it's been fantastic to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time, and really wish you well with your book.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.